Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. Today's session is entirely about customer centricity. How can we actually focus on our customer? What do we do with customers? And we just are going to continue with the dialogue that we started, I think, 2 days ago. So a warm welcome to this particular session. Right. This is. I'm sure that all of you have heard of this term called VUCA. VUCA primarily means that this is a term that was coined by US Military College to describe the challenges that the leaders are facing post the Cold War, and they came up with this entire term called VUCA. Now that's gone and kind of got modified with DVUCA D and things like that. But I thought this is extremely relevant to today's day and age, which is we live in very volatile times. The rate of change is increasing in a geometrical progression. We've been used to a rate of change which is very, very arithmetic in terms of progression. But now we've got to get used to a fact that the rate of change that is happening in our markets, with our customers, is increasing at a geometric progression. That's number one. The second part is uncertainty. And all of us today are living in times where there is hardly any clarity about the future, about what is going to happen about the future, how is the future going to pan out. I mean, are our clients going to be there, not there? Are our employees going to be there, not there? Are we going to continue to employ? And there are so many questions that are about uncertainty. And the third is the kind of complexity that we are living with. A decision-making process is no longer a straightforward, simple decision-making process, but we have a multiplicity of, decision factors that are coming up in front of us. And this whole business of ambiguity, I don't know how many of you saw that lovely movie, 50 Shades of Grey, that there is hardly any black and white anymore, and there are so many shades of grey in between the black and the white. And we've got to live with that. So we're living in times which is very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguity. And more than at any point of time, at this point of time in life, we need to figure out a way of making sense of the VUCA world that we are living in. I'm not going to talk about the 2 Ds that have been added recently, which is diversity, and so because that is not really relevant to today's topic. But we'll just stick to this whole issue of it being a very volatile, very uncertain, very complex, very ambiguous kind of a world that we're living in right now. So I want you all, if you don't mind, by now some of you must have got used to the fact that I ask you to make a few notes as we go along, and these are exercises that we will do so that we can share what we've done with each other. So I'm going to ask you to do a simple exercise that I normally would do whenever I teach or talk about customers and consumers. So let me start this off, and may I request all of you to please pick up a piece of paper so that we can get you to write some notes. So I'll just give you a minute. If you don't have one handy, you can just grab a piece of paper and a pen so that we can make some notes. So if you've all got a piece of paper and a pen, then we can begin this exercise that I'd like to take you through. The first question that I'm asking you to write the answers to: why do customers remember us? Okay. And yesterday we went through that entire exercise where we said that, look, whether it is an influencer, a buyer, or a user, some of us are in the B2B space, some of us are in the B2C space. And Selvaraj, I'll answer your question in just a while on what happens in B2B and B2C. But if you can write down, why do customers actually remember us? If you can write down what you think are the answers to this particular question. Go ahead. If you can actually write the answers, that would be great. Why do customers actually remember us? Okay. If you can pencil a few answers to that. Okay. And with your permission, I'll move to the next question. And I'd like you to answer these questions because it's a very interesting exercise that I'm going to be taking you through. And hopefully at the end of the exercise, we'll have some very interesting answers that we can even share. How do customers feel? How do customers feel after they have dealt with us? You know, there is an experience that you put together. How do they feel after they deal with us? How do customers feel after actually they deal with us? What is it that they feel like after they deal with us? Are they elated? Are they very happy? Are they satisfied? Are they just kind of, okay, you've delivered what you want to deliver for them? How do they actually feel? What do customers feel after they deal with us? Okay. Once they've dealt with us, what do you think the customers are feeling after they've dealt with us? What do customers tell their friends about us? Okay, just imagine if there are some friends of theirs, or there are some colleagues of theirs, or there are some employees of theirs. Okay, what do they tell their friends about us? Are they telling them that Priyafills is a fantastic organization, it's a great group to deal with? What is it that they're actually telling people about us? Are they talking about us at all, first of all? And if they are, what do they actually tell their friends about us? Right? If you can just make a couple of notes to that. And then the next one. In what ways do we empower our staff to deal with customers? How do we actually empower our staff to deal with customers? And I'm talking not just the frontline staff, they would obviously be empowered, but I'm talking about the backroom staff, I'm talking about the support staff. Okay, how do we empower them to deal with customers? Okay, in what ways do we empower our staff to deal with our customers? And the final one. How does our company support our customer's customer? Okay. How does our company actually support our customer's customer? Right? So 5 questions, simple questions. I mean, but they're, they seem simple, but they're actually they're fairly deep. Why do customers remember us? How do they feel after they've dealt with us? What do you think they are telling their friends about us? Their friends, their colleagues, their employees, their associates. How do we empower our staff to deal with customers? And how does our company support our customer's customer? Right? Fantastic. So like all Born to Win sessions, let me try and make this as interactive as possible. Would anybody like to share the answer to the first question that you've written down? Yes, Bharat, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think main thing why our customers at least remember us is because of price and quality. Those are the 2 things that we usually cater to.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, Sudhir. Sudhir, go ahead.
It's missing.
Sudhir, you raised your hand. Yeah, Sudhir, go ahead.
Just a minute. I have, hold on.
I'm getting a little. Yeah. See, in our case, primarily customers are in the ardent believer stage and beyond. So towards passionate advocates kind of thing. So most of them are kind of they know us pretty well because we have been there with them for a long time. So primarily, I think if there is anything they recollect about us is the technical knowledge that we have about our product.
Okay.
So any time there is something that is doubtful in terms of quality of the product or in terms of an alternate product that needs to be modified for something, so they usually go and consult Vivek, because Vivek is the technical so-called technical expert in our area of things in the industry. So they kind of give him that credit, and they are awed by the kind of technical knowledge he has about the product.
Super. So that's why they remember us. Fantastic. So let's go to the next question. What do they feel after they've dealt with us? Gautaman?
So this will be mixed reactions depending upon different customers on different products. To set few certain customers who have the matching needs will give a good appreciation. So I would like to start on a positive note. Uh, Again, there will be certain customer. There will be different kind of set of customers who have a different needs. For example, I deal a real estate product. When I show a model flat, it will mostly it will be of one particular unit, whether it will be a double bedroom or a triple bedroom. One particular model flat will be provided. There will be clients sometimes. Most of the times there will be like some clients who have a requirement of triple bedroom who visit the site. We do a good explanation of all our features like virtual reality, our model flats miniature. Afterwards, once I take to the model flat, as I said, my good side is clients given a good appreciation. My negative side would be like I am looking for a triple bedroom. Why are you giving me a two bedroom model flat?
Sure.
So this is my negativity. For which again I have to explain them. I have 22 variations. I cannot build 22 variations for every model flat, so I have to take into everything.
Sure.
So this is my mixed experiences.
All right. So let's go to the third question then. Let me bring in Arun or Selvaraj here. What do you think customers are telling their friends about us? Arun, can I bring you in?
Yeah, so customers who've been with us for several years, whenever they are referring us, they have good things to say about our company. So the onus of proving our capabilities or proving our pedigree doesn't arise. It's almost done deal, like an order. Talk about those two areas.
Okay, super. I'm sorry. What did I do? Okay, Vivek.
Yeah, can I just run through some of the thoughts that came to me on all the three, Ram, if you don't mind?
Yeah, go ahead, Vivek, please.
See, the question, first one, why do customers remember us, is actually on three issues. One is the quality of the product that we supply, the service that we provide, and the sense of win-win business values that we bring into any transaction that we have indulged in, not indulged in, that we kind of have from time to time. And also the responsiveness to any issues that come up, any issues like Sudhir was just mentioning, any responsiveness to the issues of technicalities or anything like that.
Wonderful.
We have the capability to handle that. It's not only me, we also have a good team, technical team who like work. Okay. Then how do customers feel about us? I mean, the very fact that we have continuous orders and they're in the realm of what do you call satisfied. What are those two terms that you use? I forget now. Satisfied customers and passionate believers or whatever. Because of that, I think that they feel good about us. They're mostly satisfied, and there is a sense of openness in our dealings. So there is even in so far as pricing and things are concerned, because everything in our industry is open. I mean, if you want information about what is the raw material cost, what is this thing, everybody knows everything. Okay, so it's only the capability of maintaining the track record of proper quality and values and this thing that ultimately matter. What do the customers tell their friends about us? I can only say everything good, I hope, because it's our customer list has been growing constantly, and we have a policy of appointing dealers, only 1 or 2 dealers in one particular geographical area. So if anybody comes back to us, we always point to the appointed dealer. So that way, there is some kind of control over the supply chain mechanism. This is the system that we have. Okay. That's about it on those first 3 points.
All right. So here is something that I'd like. If there's anybody else who'd like to share on this, Suhas, would you like to do a share, or anybody? I mean, I'm just before I move on.
Yeah. So, sir, in a way, actually, we have these questions pondering on our heads every day with all of our customers. Well, if I talk about why they remember us most is one way is we problem solve a lot of the complex technical issues in some of these requirements, and some of our technical skill that we exhibit. This is something that they remember us for, and the adaptability we give and the quality. We have issues with delivery, but finally the product goes out with absolute quality, which is appreciated by the customer, and they do talk very good mostly, and but they still complain on various terms that of course we also complain that they don't give out proper terms, because we cannot be too adaptable with all the terms that they exhibit, right? So these are some good things, but finally, if I would say, we even support their customers, because finally our customers are who are making aircrafts, or who are making ships, or who are making these defense equipment. They have to deliver it to users who use it. So sometimes warranty supports, we do all kinds of support, and we support them for repairs almost for 20 years. So it's quite a long support, and even during the development process of the products, we have to support them in terms of inspections, in-process inspections, and all those. So our staff is empowered in a variety, because when frontline service engineers go, they have to be empowered to take decisions, and our project managers are actually like CEOs for every project. They have to take decisions and adapt, accept. We have to take 1 or 2 extra specifications which is not specified, but we have to do the changes. So all of this happens in our business.
Wonderful. So here is a thought that I'd like to leave with all of you. Do you think you can do this exercise that I've done with you with all your key people?
We should.
And can you ask them the same question? And you'll be amazed at the kind of answers that you will actually get from them.
Very true. Very true.
This is your answers. These are, you are giving an answer from an enterprise perspective, saying that this is what I think we are doing, and I think this is why they remember us, and this is why whatever. But if you were to run these 5 questions with your staff, okay, it would be interesting for you to see what they feel and what your answers are. Okay. And yesterday, when we were talking in terms of moving up the perception value chain, okay, of moving up from being an ardent advocate into becoming a passionate broadcaster, it is this gap Okay, between what ought to be and what perhaps is that gap that needs to be filled up to move people from one level to the other, from a satisfied customer to a confident believer to an ardent advocate to a passionate broadcaster. It becomes extremely important. Because remember one thing, each of you is either dealing with a customer at a particular level, and there is a certain respect that you bring, that you carry with you. There is a certain aura that you carry with you. Okay? And it is but natural that you carry this particular aura with you. The fact is that when your frontline team or your support staff, it would be interesting if you do the same exercise with them and get their inputs and then try and figure out, is there a gap between what you believe and what they are looking at? Okay. So I did this entire exercise with a forging company. Okay. And this is a foundry in Shimoga. And when we did this exercise with the entire company, okay, the kind of variation in answers that we actually got was fantastic. And that was the basis which finally the company used to actually come up with a very, very interesting customer orientation program with the company. So whenever I've done this, when I ask the head of the company, like most of you are here, I get a set of answers which are what ought to be, or sometimes what we believe should be. Okay? Because so many times what happens, especially when you're dealing with customers, I want you guys to understand one important fact. There is a lot of filtering that happens before that information reaches you. Okay? Because there is a fair amount of interaction that has already taken place, and then there is a certain set of information that comes to you. And it would be therefore very interesting if you do this exercise with your people. I strongly recommend that you do, and I'd be very interested in hearing whether the confidence gap between what you put down and what they're saying, if it is 10%, 20%, I think you're doing extremely well. You've got your channels of communication completely unclogged. If you don't, then I think it's a good idea for you to look at this and see what can be done. All right. Let me now resize this. Okay, and move on. Oops. So yesterday we looked at this whole concept of who is my customer's customer, and today my focus really is on who is my customer's customer. Okay, I'd like to look at that. And yesterday we talked about this whole concept. So I'm sure you heard this before, but if you haven't, this is an interesting thing. Like Suhas mentioned, you can have a B2B2B as your customer's customer. Okay, which means the kind of relationship that you have is very nuanced and complex. Because you have an influencer, you have a buyer, you have a user. Okay. And very often the person that you're dealing with does not really interact, or worse still, has anything to do with the customer side. So if you're having a B2B2B kind of a relationship, that's a different kind of a thing altogether. Whereas if you're having a B2B2C, now here it is very complex, very variable. Because you have multiple touch points, and therefore the understanding of needs of your customer's customer is that much better in a B2B2C kind of a relationship. Okay, Selvaraj Soup Station is more like a B2B2C kind of a relationship, because you are dealing with a set of people who are then dealing with the ultimate customers, right? Whereas if you take Suhas, or if you take Vivek, some of yours will be B2B2B, and some of them can be B2B2C. Okay, so you can have both these kinds of customer that we're talking about. So what I'm going to be doing is that I will share with you a couple of thoughts, okay, on whether it is a B2B2B or a B2B2C kind of a customer relationship that we're talking about, right? Who is your actual customer that we're really looking at? There is a concept that I'd like to talk to you called the customer myopia trap. Okay, that when we are dealing with customers, there is a certain myopia that we all develop when we are dealing with customers. Okay. Now, what is this kind of a myopia? We try and get completely convinced that the people that we are dealing with is our actual customer. Okay, and we can fall into this trap of actually assuming that everything is perfectly all right. Okay, because remember one important fact, that whether it is a B2B2B or a B2B2C or a B2C, okay, kind of a relationship that you have, or it's just a straightforward B2B kind of a relationship that you have, okay, the kind of feedback or the feed forward that a customer can give you is terrific. Now, there's one more thing that I'd like to share with you before we move on. When it comes to handling customers, okay, always remember that whatever a customer tells you is a feed forward. It is not a feedback. Okay, I take serious objection when somebody says, can you please fill up this feedback form? A feedback primarily would mean that you are doing it on something which is an event that is over. And what is over is you're performing a post-mortem. And when you're performing a post-mortem, you normally perform a post-mortem on a dead body. Your customer is not a dead body. Your customer is someone who you should try and make him or her into a passionate broadcaster. And therefore, try and figure out a way of changing this mindset into it becoming a feed forward. Why do I say this? Whenever you have a feedback from a customer, now sometimes it can be great, sometimes it cannot be good, sometimes it's fantastic, sometimes it's terrible. This is but life. If it is a feedback that you are doing with your team, then remember everybody is going to be defensive. And nobody wants to take accountability for any minor error or major error that has happened. But if you were to take this away and convince your team that what we're going to do is a feed forward system, then what we are talking about is that we are preparing for the future. And if you can convince the team that, look, this exercise, the previous exercise that we talked about, the exercise that we want, we're not doing it from a feedback perspective, but we're doing it from a feed forward perspective. That would be a great mindset change that you need to bring into your team and the way they deal with customers. So the customer myopia trap that you can fall in is exactly this. That you can try and figure out saying, okay, what are the complaints? No, it's not a complaint, it's a suggestion. So there is this language and messaging that has to change, because once this language and messaging changes, then you're actually going to figure out how we can move the envelope further, how we can push the envelope even more. That's what is going to happen. So here are a couple of things that I'd like to share with you. What are the conversations that you're having about your customer's customer with your existing customers? Are you having any conversations with them? Do your normal conversations with your customer, at least 20 to 30% of them, do they include what is happening with their customers? What are their inputs? What are they? So in any conversation that you have, I think it's very, very important for us to include conversations about what their customers are doing, because this will give you some very interesting insights. Okay. If their focus is on low cost or lowering costs or better costs, a conversation about their customer will give you an insight as to why are they pushing you to reduce costs. What is it that they're looking for right now to make sure that you get into a cost consciousness strategy? Or if they're demanding a particular quality level, okay, why is it that they're demanding that particular quality level? Normally, when we hear about quality and quality issues, the instinctive perception is to believe that it is a complaint. But if we can actually encourage our people to go and talk to our customers about their customers, their customers thereof, then you will get an insight as to why is a particular quality level being demanded by this particular customer, okay, or by this guy. The need for a particular kind of delivery, okay, are they looking for a particular speed? Is there a kind of a speed that they're looking at? Are they under pressure from their customers in terms of speed of delivery? What is it that they're looking for, right? Ability to customize your own product. Is it possible for them? Is it possible for you to figure out how you can actually customize your products to serve their requirements? Okay. And finally, what are the dynamics of the marketplace that they are operating in, including market growth, okay, and competitive pressures? All of these are insights that you need to pick up. All of these are insights that your frontline guys need to pick up and share with you. And you can, this is what I just put down, but you can actually go down and say, here is a whole host of stuff that are insights that we need to capture on a regular basis. Because if we were able to capture these insights, then think about the kind of advantage that you would get in terms of dealing with your customers. Okay, so any conversation that you have with your customer must include this fact. And finally, if you were to have these kinds of conversations, okay, what is the kind of pressure that you are facing in terms of pricing or quality or speed or delivery or customizing your products, etc., etc. That is when you start moving into a trusted partner collaboration from just being a supplier of a set of products or services. So, like yesterday we talked about passionate broadcasters, can we actually move this entire relationship from a perception perspective to being trusted partners? Is it possible for us to collaborate, okay, and make sure that we get into this situation where we actually become trusted partners of our customer, okay? And all of this is possible if we start looking at our customer's customer. And if you can actually work that whole value chain out completely, the entire flow, that look, I am supplying to you, you are supplying to somebody, is that going finally to the customer, or is there some, in what way can we actually focus on this entire thing? So to get out of this customer myopia trap that I'm talking about, we need to practice these things. Every conversation that you have with your customer must include a conversation about their customers, number one. Number two, because then and only then you can structure your conversations around these areas and you will gain valuable insights. Is there a cost pressure? Is there a quality pressure? Is there a speed of delivery pressure? Is there a customization pressure? Are there dynamics of the marketplace that you need to understand? So whether you're in a B2B2B situation or a B2B2C situation, or a B2C situation, or just a plain, you can never be in a B2B kind of a situation unless you're supplying some products to the final user, which is okay. But if you're in a B2C or a B2B2C or a B2B2B, this insight can become a huge competitive edge as far as we are concerned. And this is something that we need to get our people to start focusing on and start capturing this information in a more organized manner, because this is what is going to help each one of us in terms of going forward. There are these two models that I'd like to show you. Okay, one is from a group called Upwork.com, and this is a very interesting model that I'd like to show you guys. Okay, it is a customer centricity model. If you look at this whole issue of customer centricity, there are a couple of things that need to fall into place. Okay, starting with you. Is the leadership that you're focusing, is the leadership that you're providing to the organization a very customer-focused leadership? Whatever leadership that you are providing to your company, is it on that customer focus? Is the kind of language that you're using signaling that? What is the understanding of your customer and their customer? How can you design the entire experience that your people are providing to your entire customer? Okay, each time they interact with anything that they do, whether it is formal or informal, is the experience such that, remember the question that we asked, what will they tell their people about? What will they tell their friends about? That is directly linked to this particular area. How can you empower your frontline? And that was the question that we asked, saying, how do you empower your staff? Okay, and very important, being customer centric, you need to have metrics that are measurable. It's not a feeling. It's not a nice gray, halo kind of a feeling that I think my customers are doing great, but we need to have solid metrics in place on each of those that we talked about. And finally, what is the kind of feedback that is driving continuous improvement in your system? So here is a customer-centric model that I'd like to recommend to each of you, that if you look at it, it's a very simple model. There is one more model that I'd like to take you through. But this is a model that, I'd like you to look at. It's a simple model, but it's a model that can work wonders for each one of us. Okay, your leadership, what is the understanding of your customer? How do you design the entire experience when they interact with you? How do you empower them? What are the metrics that you're going to set up? And is there any feedback mechanism that you have for continuous improvement? So I'd like to pause for a minute here, and I'd like to request you to take a look at this and see, is there any particular area where you think there is some scope for improvement, some scope for strengthening? Is there anything that you'd like to do? So this is a time that I'd like you to spend a minute on reflection and figuring out, is there anything that we can actually do on this? Are we doing it properly? Are we capturing it? Let's take a minute to reflect on this. What I will also do is that I will send this slide to you so that you can keep this slide. But if there is any specific area that you think needs a little bit of attention, this is a good time for you to make a note of that and figure out, is there something that we can actually do on this? If you'd like me to, yeah, Bharat, go ahead.
Yeah, Ram, I think this entire presentation is quite valuable to me, at least, because what I'm facing constantly for the last 3-4 years because of the industry that we are into is a lot of focus on collection because payments are delayed a lot from customer side. Because of that, we are not able to develop a good relationship on a long-term basis with customers. Even though we have a good intentions, because of this we need to keep on constantly talking to them, put a lot of pressure on them for collections. Is there a way that I can be better at, and my team can be better at managing this kind of situations?
Sure, Bharat. That is a very valid point. Remember one very important thing, Bharat. The amount of money that a customer has to pay you is limited. Okay. So let us say, I know that you supply sand and you supply stuff to a builder. So let's take a builder X. Let's not name any builder, but let's just take a builder X. And let's say that builder X has got 1 crore to disperse today. Okay. Now it all depends, Bharat. Where are you in terms of the pecking order?
Agree. Completely agree.
Are you with me? So are you right on top? Are you somewhere in the middle? Are you right at the bottom? Because obviously by the time he comes down to the bottom, you're going to have lesser and lesser and lesser of, available money. So if you have a great relationship with your customer, okay, and if you see that particular exercise that we did in the beginning, you can certainly move up the pecking order.
Yep.
Okay. Because remember, he's just got a limited amount of money that he can, he's also having pressure from his customer. Right? If I was your customer and if I had all the money on earth, why would I want to delay your payment? Right? Obviously, because I'm stretched myself, that I'm delaying things.
Exactly. Agree.
Right? So if you are not somewhere in that pecking order and you're not high up there, then obviously there is something that you need to figure out a way of having those conversations by which you can move up that particular ladder. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sudhir, go ahead, please.
You were saying about this measurable metrics.
Yeah.
Did you mean, put those 5 questions into that matrix and measure it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, when I put those 5 questions in my team to measure it, won't the answers be subjective?
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
So
now,
how can we convert what is basically a feeling into something which is more measurable? So we discussed. Sorry, go ahead, Sudhir.
What I have designed this matrix is, these 5 questions I asked my team and asked them to give them on a scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
So when I'm doing it across the team and I get the average score, so I know which of these 5 questions require more attention and which of them will probably is across the team, common knowledge across the team.
Sure.
Now, this answer triggered off because I saw that question that Gautaman asked. Please explain matrix clearly.
Yeah.
So, what I'm trying to address this thing is, even though the matrix is subjective, it is the general feeling that our company holds about that customer, in which area we are lacking in terms of customer centricity, and in which area we can accept it as the truth for as far as customer centricity is concerned. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. So you see, every organization will have to evolve its own metrics. Why should you have metrics? Because we need to move away from this subjectivity, Sudhir. All the time we are caught in this trap of subjectivity. That's where that customer myopia comes.
Correct.
I think everybody is happy with me. I think we're doing very well. I think, but then we need to move away from I think or I feel or I know. I am sure. Okay. One of the metrics that I keep telling people to look at, okay, are what we discussed yesterday, if you recall. We said pricing, okay. We talked about margins. We talked about credit periods. We talked about repeat purchase, okay. Can you start measuring that? Right? So can you have some fairly interesting metrics of that kind, hard metrics available, by which you can actually come up with answers and measure that? Because you see, what gets measured, Sudhir, gets done. If it is not going to get measured, it's not going to get done. You know, so you can even do one more thing, Sudhir. There are very formal customer satisfaction score questionnaires that are available. Okay, and this is called CSAT, and there are a number of organizations that actually run this for you, which is an anonymous questionnaire that is sent to your customers, and then they rate you on a certain set of parameters that are important to you and to them. And then, you get those customer satisfaction scores, like very much like you have a employee satisfaction score, you have a customer satisfaction score. But the important thing is this, that could be an expensive operation. I don't know whether it's required, not required, etc., etc. So that's a different question. But a metric is very simple. You must have a way of expressing it, Gautaman, in terms of a percentage. If there are 10 people who are going to visit your site, Gautaman, what is your conversion ratio? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 15%? Is it 20%? Is it 25%? Is it 100%? Okay. Now that becomes an interesting metric to measure and benchmark. Because then what you will say that, okay, my conversion ratio right now, if 5 customers visit us, only 1 is buying my flat. All right. Now we need to move it up from 1 to 2. So what kind of an experience can we deliver to the customer by which we can move from 1 to 2? Now that is measurable. Okay. If you're going to stop only at saying everybody who's come is very impressed with my property, now how does that very impressed translate into sales? It doesn't, no? People may be coming and saying, oh, fantastic property, beautiful location, very impressive, very nice. But then at the end of the day, if it is not converting into sales, then there is something wrong that is happening somewhere. Are you with me? So you will have to evolve metrics. I personally believe that the best metrics are these: pricing, credit terms, margins, pressure on costs, okay, repeat business. These are all interesting metrics that can be built within the organization, and you can then start benchmarking against them, saying, this is how we've been operating, this is how we need to operate, this is what we need to do to improve this. If you're under continuous pressure on pricing, then obviously we've not spent enough time with our customer to understand their customer and find out from them what is their perception in terms of pricing. Okay, like that. All right. Can we go ahead? So take a look at this model, gentlemen. This is a very, very interesting model. I find this a very simple model to use to enhance customer centricity. And this very clearly ties in with the 5 questions that I asked you a little while earlier. Try and figure out in which area we need to make some improvement. Is it the leadership issue? Is it understanding our customer and their customer? Is it the experience that we need to design? And so on and so forth. Now, there is a slightly more complex model that I'd like to show you on customer centricity. Don't get put off by all the Venn diagrams and things like that. Some of you who are engineers here will obviously enjoy the stuff, but it's a very simple, it's a very simple thing again. Do we have a customer-focused strategy in place? Meaning, do we have answers to these questions? Who do we sell to? What do we sell? Who do we compete with? How do we win, etc. In terms of operational excellence, what buying experiences are we trying to create? In what processes must we excel? How do we leverage information technology? How do we institutionalize the entire feedback mechanism that we've got? In terms of having a customer-focused organization and culture, very clearly, how do we organize for success? How do we create customer-focused attitudes and behavior? And how do we fill for skill gaps? Both these models, according to me, are very interesting models. But I personally like to work with the model that I showed you a little earlier. I think this is a very simple model to work with. It's an easy model for all of us to focus on and figure out how we can actually start getting the kind of answers that we actually require. Having said this, in a VUCA world, this is the responsibility that all of us have. We need to figure out ways and means of changing the entire dimensions of VUCA. We need to have volatility replaced by vision, which means we must have a clear intent and be future ready. We must replace uncertainty with understanding, which means we must listen. We must have lots and lots of empathy, not interrupt. We must have a lot of clarity, which means we must encourage our teams to start thinking of options and consequences. And finally, we must focus on agility, replace ambiguity with agility, which means try hard, fall, learn, get up, walk again. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to be looking at on a continuous basis. That this VUCA world that we are in is here to stay. There is nothing that, this is bound to be there. But if we can replace it with vision, with understanding, with clarity, and with agility, we've created a fantastic team. And we are going to be offering a service to our customer and to their customer and becoming a truly customer-centric organization.